There is a diverse range of applicants for Criminal Justice Commission grants. Perhaps you have written proposals in the past, or maybe this is your first time. Either way, if you are thinking about applying for an Oregon Criminal Justice Commission grant, this training is for you. It is recommended to complete this training before you start answering the questions in the grant program solicitation. It is highly recommended that, as soon as the solicitation is open, you set aside ample time to complete this training with anyone with whom you will be collaborating. The complete training is approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes. However, it is expected that you will periodically pause this video to work on your program or intervention design. There will be suggested times throughout this training for you to complete this task. You might also find it necessary to skip ahead or re-watch certain sections. You may even need to stop the video and return on another day. For planning purposes, this training is divided into 4 modules, with Module 2 being the longest and Module 4 being the shortest. Plan to allow the most time for Module 2. This module will help you design your program or intervention. You will be glad you took the time to do this when you begin answering the application questions. Note: the examples provided in this training are for instructional purposes only. They are not meant as guidance for the types of activities that the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission will or will not approve for funding. Let's get started. The objective of this training is to equip participants with the knowledge and skills to write compelling grant proposals that effectively communicate project value and increase funding success. Let's begin with a quick overview of the funding agency, the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, or the CJC. We will talk later about the importance of understanding the funder's priorities when applying for a grant. The mission of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, CJC, is to improve the legitimacy, efficiency, and effectiveness of state and local criminal justice systems. To help accomplish this mission, CJC disperses state and federal funds through the administration of multiple public safety grant programs intended for eligible local or state agencies, tribal governments, and community-based organizations. In this training, we will go over a brief introduction to grant writing. The majority of the training will be spent on developing a strong proposal through solid program design and practical writing tips. It will conclude with a brief overview of submitting the proposal. Let's begin with Module 1. In this module, we will cover what a grant proposal is, develop an understanding of how to read and understand grant solicitations, and discuss aligning projects and interventions with funding priorities. A grant proposal is a formal document that an individual or organization submits to a funding agency, like a government body, foundation, or corporation, to request financial support for a specific project. In this case, you are submitting a proposal to the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, asking them to fund your project or intervention. The proposal outlines what the program or intervention aims to achieve, how it will be carried out, and why it's important. It also includes a detailed budget explaining how the requested funds will be used. Essentially, a grant proposal is a persuasive document that aims to convince the funder that the project is worthwhile and that the applicant is capable of completing it. A grant solicitation is an announcement from a funding agency, government, foundation, or corporation that invites organizations or individuals to submit grant proposals for a specific purpose. It provides details about funding priorities, eligibility requirements, the availability and duration of funding, as well as the application process and timelines. It is essential to read the solicitation carefully before you begin writing your proposal. Before you begin your proposal, it is important to review the eligibility requirements in the solicitation. Some CJC grants require the applicant to be a government entity, while others allow for community-based organizations to apply. Also, some grants specify whether the application can be a joint project between multiple partners. Here are 2 examples from the CJC grant programs. If you do not meet the eligibility requirements, do not continue with your application. If you are unsure, don't hesitate to get in touch with the CJC program coordinator, whose contact information is listed on the solicitation. You may also find this contact information on the CJC webpage. Each solicitation will have a unique purpose. Make sure you fully understand the purpose of the grant program you are applying for. Here are two examples from CJC grant programs. These examples can seem like a lot of words, but pay attention to the key words. These will help you understand the grant parameters and funding priorities. The solicitation will help you decide if the grant is right for your program. You might need to consider how to sustain your program after the grant period ends. This could be a question in the application process. The solicitation will also give you an idea of how competitive the grant is. Some grants are formula-based, while others are competitive in nature. Regardless of the level of competition, all applicants must ensure that their proposal is well thought out, well-written, and complete. Review the solicitation for the application timeline. You will need to consider your ability to prepare a well-thought-out, well-written, and comprehensive proposal within the provided timeframe. As you plan the grant activities, take into consideration the timing of when grant funding will be issued. The process includes the grant solicitation is released, grant applications are due, award decisions are made, and agreements are issued. The project period includes a set start and end date. During that time, specific reporting requirements and a disbursement schedule will be in effect. You may only expend funds during the project period. In addition to watching this training and participating in any grant program specific webinars, be sure to review the CJC Grant Administration Guide and thoroughly review the solicitation. CJC grant solicitations include a Goals and Priorities section. These priorities are in addition to the eligibility requirements. Here you can see two examples from CJC grant programs. The Jail-Based Medications for Opioid Use Disorder grant program and the Organized Retail Theft grant program. Notice the example on the left states, funds awarded must be used for one of the following. The example on the right states, the Commission will prioritize applications that demonstrate any or all of the following. Regardless of the program you are applying for, ensuring that your program or intervention aligns with these goals and priorities is of utmost importance. As you work on aligning your program or intervention with the stated goals and priorities, consider the importance of relevance, impact, competition, and stewardship. Like all funders, the CJC grant programs have specific missions and goals, which are typically set in statute. Programs and interventions must align with these priorities to receive funding support. When a project aligns with the CJC program priorities, it demonstrates that the project will contribute to the state's goals and have a greater impact. CJC grants serve as a force multiplier for the state by strategically amplifying the impact of resources. First, the state can extend their influence to a wider range of geographic areas or communities than they could directly manage. By providing funds to local organizations, they support projects that are tailored to specific community needs, increasing the overall effectiveness of their investment. Second, grants enable the state to tap into the specialized knowledge and capabilities of local organizations that are best positioned to address specific issues. Local agencies often possess a deeper understanding of the problem and have established relationships with the target population, which leads to more effective program implementation. Third, grants can encourage organizations to develop innovative approaches and solutions to address complex problems. They also foster collaboration among various agencies and organizations, promoting a coordinated and comprehensive response. Fourth, by strategically funding projects that address the root causes of problems, grants can contribute to long-term systemic change. This approach can lead to more sustainable solutions and a greater return on the state's investment. And fifth, when grantees track and report on specific outcomes, it ensures that funds are used effectively and that programs are achieving their intended goals. This focus on accountability enhances the credibility of the funder and demonstrates the impact of their investments. While not always, CJC grant funding is often competitive. Closely aligning your project with the state's priorities makes your proposal more attractive compared to others. The state wants to ensure that its resources are used effectively. Aligning with their priorities demonstrates that the funding will be utilized in a manner deemed valuable. Here is an example of the priorities from the Illegal Marijuana Market Enforcement Grant. Notice there are 5 priorities, and the question requires you to address each of them. The priorities include 1. Fund training opportunities that assist applicants in addressing illegal marijuana markets. 2. Address cases that require complex financial accounting. 3. Track outcomes. 4. Collaborate with other agencies and organizations. And/or 5. Provide trauma-informed and culturally and linguistically specific and responsive services to persons affected by the ongoing humanitarian crisis associated with the illegal marijuana market. By the end of this training, you will be prepared to answer these types of questions. Now it is time to begin the longest module. Module 2, Developing a Strong Proposal Through Effective Program Design. The narrative of a grant proposal is crucial. It tells the story of your program or intervention and convinces reviewers that your work is worthy of their support. The backbone of a successful grant proposal is the program design. If you take the time up front to ensure you have designed a quality program or intervention, writing the proposal will be much easier, and you are more likely to receive funding for your program. A well-designed program directly and effectively addresses the identified problem, increasing the likelihood of achieving the stated goals and objectives. A clear program design provides a roadmap for implementation, outlining specific activities, timelines, and responsible parties. This ensures that the program is carried out in a coordinated and organized manner. A strong program design includes measurable outcomes, which are essential for evaluating the program's effectiveness and demonstrating its impact to funders and stakeholders. The grant reviewers prioritize proposals with well-defined program designs as they demonstrate the applicant's understanding of the problem, their ability to develop a logical and effective solution, and their commitment to achieving results. A well-designed program considers the long-term sustainability of the program, including how it will be funded and maintained after the grant period concludes. To help you build a well-designed program or intervention, in this module, we will cover drafting a clear and concise statement of the problem, backing up your problem statement with supporting evidence, developing your project action plan, including setting meaningful goals and objectives, identifying your program activities and establishing timelines and methodologies, backing up your plan with supporting evidence of why the program or intervention you have selected is effective, identifying how you will measure the results of your program or intervention, and lastly, developing a sustainability plan, if that is applicable to your program. Throughout this module, you will have the opportunity to pause the training and work on your program design. One of the most important topics we are covering is writing a strong statement of the problem. The grant reviewers want to see this clearly and concisely in your proposal. A problem statement describes the issue that a program or intervention aims to address. In other words, it clearly and concisely explains what's wrong and why it needs to be fixed. For example, you might start off with something simple. The presence of illegal marijuana markets decreases public safety, damages community welfare, and often results in the dumping of harmful waste, which hurts the environment. This is a good start, but a statement of the problem includes a little more. A statement of the problem explains why your program or intervention is needed. It describes the problem clearly for your audience, including what the issue is, who is affected, and how they are affected. Notice it focuses only on the problem, not the solution. You are only describing the issue here, not how you intend to fix it. Specificity matters in the statement of the problem. Specificity builds credibility and shows relevance. Using local data or community-specific examples proves the problem exists where you're working, not just nationally. You want to avoid vague statements like, there is a lack of resources. To get more specific, ask yourself, who exactly is affected? Is there a particular community or population? How big is the problem? What is the scope or severity of the problem? Are there patterns? Where does it occur? Is there a particular location, neighborhood, or region? When does it happen? Is it more prevalent at night, on weekends, during certain seasons? What factors are influencing it? What is the effectiveness, or lack thereof, of any ongoing or available interventions or previous programs? What are the consequences if nothing changes? Now take what you understand about your problem and craft a clear and concise statement of the problem. Although it may feel impossible considering all that goes into the statement of the problem, but try stating the problem in just one sentence. Here is a formula you can try. Victims are harmed by the behaviors of who at places at times. Let's look at some examples. Let's expand on our previous simple statement. The presence of illegal marijuana markets decreases public safety, damages community welfare, and often results in the dumping of harmful waste, which hurts the environment. Using the formula, the statement of the problem becomes, communities across the state are significantly harmed by decreased public safety, damaged community welfare, and severe environmental degradation, including the illegal dumping of toxic waste, stemming from the proliferation of illegal marijuana cultivation by criminal organizations at illicit grow sites, including both outdoor and indoor operations in rural, remote, and increasingly residential areas. Year-round, with heightened outdoor activity during the spring and summer growing seasons. Could you see the formula in that example? This statement identifies the victims, communities across the state, the harm, decreased public safety, damaged community welfare, and severe environmental degradation. The behavior, illegal marijuana cultivation, who, criminal organizations, the place, illicit grow sites in rural, remote, and increasingly residential areas, and the times year-round with heightened activity during spring and summer growing seasons. Let's try an example for a different grant program. Retailers and the public are harmed by significant financial losses and potential safety risks caused by organized groups engaging in large-scale theft at retail establishments throughout Oregon, occurring with increasing frequency. Did you see the formula this time? The statement identifies the victims, retailers and the public, the harm, financial losses and safety risks, the behavior and the who, organized groups, engaging in large-scale theft, the place, retail establishments, and a contextual element, increasing frequency, to provide a more complete picture of the problem. Now is a good time to pause the video and try crafting a one-sentence description of your problem. Don't worry if you feel frustrated at first. Stating a clear and concise problem statement is more difficult than it seems. Moving on to step 2. Back up your problem statement with evidence. Funders receive many grant proposals, and they can't fund them all. The proposals that stand out are those that clearly show there's a real problem, not just a guess or opinion, and the problem affects real people, backed up with facts. Evidence based on measurable data, research, or facts from studies, reports, or official records adds credibility and objectivity to your proposal. It is proof that the problem you're describing is real and that your project is needed. Consider this. Which is more compelling? That is a bad store and it needs to be shut down. Or the store has been robbed 5 times in the last month, and 80% of people in our neighborhood say they feel unsafe going near that store. Without evidence, your proposal may sound like a personal opinion, like in example 1. Funders might not trust that this issue is serious. In contrast, the data and statistics in example 2 build credibility and help justify the funding request. Suppose you are submitting a grant proposal for a focused deterrence program aimed at reducing violent crime. What data would support this? You could look at crime rate statistics, such as an increase in overall violent crime rates, homicides, non-fatal shootings, and aggravated assaults in City X over a specific period, or specific data showing that a small number of individuals are responsible for a disproportionately high percentage of violent crime incidents. You could look at arrest or recidivism data, such as statistics on the number of individuals with a history of multiple violent arrests or convictions, data indicating high recidivism rates for violent offenses among individuals released from incarceration, or information showing that a specific group of identified repeat violent offenders is actively involved in ongoing violent incidents. Another option could be geographic hotspot data, including maps or data indicating concentrations of violent crime in specific neighborhoods or hotspots within a city X, which suggests where these individuals are most active. Victimization data is a good source that provides a different perspective. This could include information on the number of victims of violent crime and the impact on their lives and the community's sense of safety. A good way to supplement law enforcement heavy data is to utilize community survey data. For example, surveys indicating a high level of fear of crime or a decrease in community perception of safety due to violent incidents help tell the story of the problem credibly and objectively. Another possible source would be law enforcement intelligence, such as internal police data and intelligence reports detailing active violent individuals, their networks, and patterns of violence, even if not leading to immediate arrests. One last example is forensic evidence data, such as analysis of ballistics, DNA, or other forensic evidence that links specific individuals to multiple violent crime scenes. The more local data you can use, the better. Reviewers want to understand the scope and context of a local problem. Now pause the video and make a list of credible sources of evidence that demonstrate your problem is real and worthy of addressing. Be specific. What specific reports? What kind of crime data? What internal data? What tells the story of your problem? The next step is to create a plan for addressing the problem. A detailed action plan is a crucial component of a successful grant proposal. It demonstrates to the funder that the applicant has a clear vision, a well-thought-out strategy, and the capacity to implement the proposed project effectively. A common mistake is that applicants skip the first two steps and start here at step 3. They jump to their solution without first defining the problem and examining the factors that contribute to it. This approach leads to messy proposals and ineffective programs. Before we talk about the components of an action plan, let's go over what the plan conveys to the funder. An action plan provides a clear and focused roadmap for executing the project. It outlines the specific activities, timelines, and responsible parties, ensuring that all partners are aligned and working towards the same goals. A well-developed action plan demonstrates that the applicant has carefully considered the resources, challenges, and potential obstacles involved in the project. This enhances the credibility of the proposal and assures the funder that the project is feasible and likely to succeed. By outlining specific activities and timelines, an action plan creates a framework for monitoring progress and evaluating outcomes. This ensures accountability and enables the funder to track the project's progress and success. A detailed action plan helps the applicant to identify the resources needed to implement the project, including personnel, funding, equipment, and materials. This enables efficient resource allocation and helps prevent cost overruns or delays. For projects involving multiple partners, an action plan is crucial for defining roles and responsibilities, establishing clear communication protocols, and ensuring effective collaboration and coordination. So now that you have clearly and concisely identified the problem and backed it up with evidence, it is time to introduce your proposed solution. The action plan explains what you plan to do, how you will do it, and who will be involved. It outlines your goals and objectives. This is where you choose your program activities, build out your timelines and methodologies, and explain why your chosen methods are appropriate and effective. Let's break this down. The action plan is where you clearly describe the activities and strategies you will implement to achieve the project's goals and objectives. To get started, you will explain the specific methods, approaches, and techniques you will use to carry out the activities. You also identify the key personnel and partners who will be responsible for implementing the project and describe their roles and responsibilities. Let's look at an example. Here we revisit City X and its plans for a focused deterrence strategy. This action plan clearly and succinctly describes what the program will do and how it will achieve its objectives. They have described their plans to use call-in meetings and how they intend to utilize these meetings to reduce violent crime. Continuing with this plan, the City X Police Department has identified the key partners involved and their roles in the program. How did this example clearly and concisely explain the three components? What you plan to do, how you will do it, and who will be involved. We will talk more about answer structure in Module 3, but notice how easy it is to understand what is being proposed here. Your reviewers will be able to clearly understand your plan and score your application accordingly. Pause the video and write out what you plan to do, how you will do it, and who will be involved. Try to follow the example format, such as using a combination of narrative and bullet points to ensure your plan is clear and concise. Now that you've clearly identified a problem, you've backed it up with evidence, and you've started laying out your plan, the next step in the action plan is to define your goals and objectives. Understanding the difference between goals and objectives can be confusing. Let's take a look at each. Goals are broad statements that describe the overall intended impact of the program or intervention. They define what the program wants to achieve in the long term. Goals are generally less specific and not always measurable in a precise way. Objectives are the steps that will help you achieve your program goals. More on these in a minute. How do you set a program goal? Think about the long-term impact. What do you want to accomplish? What is the main thing you want to achieve by the end of the program or intervention? This is your overall goal. Do you want to eliminate the problem? Reduce the problem? Reduce the harm? Move the problem to a suitable location? Improve the ability to handle the problem when it occurs? Or something else entirely? Here are some examples of goals for the Illegal Marijuana Market Enforcement Grant Program. Disrupt and dismantle illegal marijuana cultivation operations and associated criminal enterprises. Reduce criminal activity, for example, violence, human trafficking, and financial crimes. Linked to illicit grow sites, and protect communities and the environment from the negative impacts of illegal cultivation and associated hazardous waste. What about some examples for other grant programs? Reduce the involvement of individuals with behavioral health conditions in the criminal justice system. Provide effective treatment and support for individuals with opioid use disorder within correctional facilities, and facilitate their transition to community-based care. Reduce the prevalence and impact of organized retail theft on businesses and communities. Reduce violent crime, particularly that associated with gang activity and drug trafficking. Using our illegal marijuana market enforcement example, let's start to put this all together. First, we have our statement of the problem. Communities across the state are significantly harmed by decreased public safety, damaged community welfare, and severe environmental degradation, including the illegal dumping of toxic waste, stemming from the proliferation of illegal marijuana cultivation by criminal organizations at illicit grow sites, including both outdoor and indoor operations in rural, remote, and increasingly residential areas. Year-round, with heightened outdoor activity during the spring and summer growing seasons. And now we have our program goals. Disrupt and dismantle illegal marijuana cultivation operations in associated criminal enterprises. Reduce criminal activity, for example, violence, human trafficking, and financial crimes linked to illicit grow sites, and protect communities and the environment from the negative impacts of illegal cultivation and associated hazardous waste. Do you see how these align? Now pause the video and define the goal or goals of your program or intervention. What is your intended long-term impact? What do you want to accomplish with your program or intervention? Now let's talk about objectives. Objectives outline the precise steps you will take to achieve the goal. They are SMART statements, meaning they are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Objectives are more focused than our overall goals, and they include details on how success will be measured. Objectives often quantify the expected change and set a timeline for achieving it. Building off our illegal marijuana market enforcement program goals, our overall SMART objectives might be enhance intelligence and identification. By the end of year one, increase interagency intelligence sharing regarding illicit grow sites by 25%, as measured by the number of joint intelligence briefings and shared reports. By the end of year one, identify 50 new illicit grow sites through enhanced intelligence, surveillance, and community reporting, as documented in intelligence databases. And by the end of year one, initiate 20 preliminary investigations into suspected high-priority grow sites, leading to actionable intelligence reports. Intensify investigation and dismantling operations. By the end of year two, initiate 30 formal investigations into high-priority grow sites identified in year one, leading to actionable intelligence reports. By the end of year two, execute 15 search warrants resulting in the dismantling of illegal grow operations. And by the end of year two, achieve a 10% increase in arrests of individuals directly involved in illicit cultivation and distribution activities compared to year one. And finally, sustain enforcement and mitigate impact. By the end of year three, maintain a minimum of 10 successful dismantling operations, adapting to evolving illegal cultivation methods. By the end of year three, seize 5,000 plus pounds of illegally cultivated marijuana and recover 1,000 plus gallons of illicit chemicals and waste from dismantled sites. And by the end of year three, ensure coordination with environmental agencies for post-dismantling site assessment and, where feasible, initiation of remediation for 75% of dismantled sites. Do you see how our proposal is developing? We have a clear and concise statement of the problem, as well as overall goals of what we want to achieve, and we have smart objectives to help us reach these goals. It's your turn. Pause the video and write out the objectives of your program or intervention. Let's continue designing your program or intervention. The plan is getting more detailed, and now we need to identify meaningful project activities that are directly connected to the goal of your program. Program activities are the specific actions you will take to achieve the objectives and overall purpose of your proposed program. Here are some guidelines for program activities. The activities should directly address the problem identified in the statement of the problem. Each activity should contribute to one or more of the program's objectives. Activities should be specific and detailed. Watch out for vague descriptions. The activities should be appropriate for and beneficial to the individuals or communities the program aims to serve. If possible, the activities should be based on research or best practices in the field. More on this later. Grant activities should promote collaboration when possible. The activities should be achievable within the grant period and with the available resources. And the activities should account for all aspects of the program, including implementation, coordination, and evaluation. In general, acceptable activities will be provided in the solicitation. Here are some examples, including case management, telemedicine, prosecution, and collaborative partnerships. Make sure your proposed activities are allowable by reviewing the solicitation and the CJC Grant Administration Guide. Let's look at how our legal marijuana market enforcement program design is coming along. We previously completed our statement of the problem, overall goal, and defined our objectives. We are now adding activities for each objective. Under Objective 1, Enhance Intelligence and Identification, our activities are Activity 1.1, Enhance Interagency Intelligence Sharing and Analysis. Activity 1.2, Conduct Targeted Surveillance and Aerial Reconnaissance. Activity 1.3, Initiate Preliminary Field Investigations and Lead Generation. Under Objective 2, Intensify Investigation and Dismantling Operations, our activities are Activity 2.1, Conduct Comprehensive Formal Investigations. Activity 2.2, Plan and execute coordinated dismantling operations. Activity 2.3, conduct arrests and support prosecution efforts. And under Objective 3, sustain enforcement and mitigate impact. Our activities are Activity 3.1, maintain sustained intelligence-led enforcement. Activity 3.2, systematically track and document seizures and recoveries. Activity 3.3, coordinate post-dismantling site assessment and environmental referral. Pause the video now and make a list of activities for each of your objectives. You will see that the plan continues to get more detailed. To provide a clear path for implementing your program, create an outline that identifies timelines and the methodologies you will use for each activity. Writing out this part of the plan helps answer the question of what the program funds will be used to do. It also ensures that the activities are well planned and aligned with the grant program's priorities. This step also helps to identify the resources needed to carry out the program as intended. Here is our illegal marijuana market enforcement program again. We have identified the overall project timeline of 3 years and divided the objectives into a series of 3 phases. Phase 1, Intelligence, Identification, and Preliminary Investigation, Year 1. Phase 2, Formal Investigation and Tactical Dismantling Operations, Year 2. Phase 3, Sustained Enforcement, Recovery, and Impact Mitigation, Year 3. Each phase has been given a timeline. These also align with the timeline set in the SMART objectives. You may need to revisit your objectives and adjust the timelines at this stage. Each activity has been given a timeline within its larger phase timeline. For example, Activity 1.1 is ongoing throughout the first year, but Activity 1.2 takes place in months 3 through 12, and Activity 1.3 does not begin until month 4. We have also added a more detailed methodology for each activity. For example, the methods described for Activity 1.3 initiate preliminary field investigations and lead generation are as follows. Deploy trained field teams to conduct non-intrusive preliminary assessments of suspected grow sites identified through intelligence and surveillance. Activities include external observations, collecting publicly available information, and validating intelligence leads to build initial probable cause. This will create comprehensive initial reports for all 50 identified sites, preparing them for formal investigation. Here we repeat the same process of adding timelines and describing the methodology for the activities planned for Phase 2, formal investigation and tactical dismantling operations, which will be the second year of the program. For example, let's look at Activity 2.2, plan and execute coordinated dismantling operations. The timeline is months 16 to 24. The methodology includes develop detailed site-specific operational plans for each target site, involving tactical law enforcement units, hazardous materials experts, and environmental agency liaisons. Successfully execute at least 15 search warrants, ensuring safe site entry and clearing, thorough criminal evidence processing, seizure of illegal marijuana product and cultivation equipment, and secure initial containment of hazardous waste. This directly contributes to the dismantling target. And here we can see the final phase of our proposed program, sustained enforcement, recovery, and impact mitigation, occurring in Year 3. For example, Activity 3.1, maintains sustained intelligence-led enforcement, employs the following methodology. Continue robust intelligence gathering and analysis, focusing on emerging cultivation trends, new trafficking routes, and identifying recidivist offenders to ensure the continued identification of viable targets. Conduct targeted patrols and surveillance in areas prone to illegal grow operations to deter new sites from forming, aiming for an annual average of at least 10 successful dismantling operations in Year 3. Pause the video and build your program timeline and list your methodologies. The next part of the plan is to explain why your chosen methods are appropriate and effective. Using evidence-based practices or research to inform the design of your program or intervention is crucial because it enhances the likelihood that the program will be effective, efficient, and have a positive impact. An evidence-based solution is a program or practice that has been proven effective through rigorous research and evaluation. This means that there is data to show that the solution achieves its intended outcomes. We use evidence-based solutions in program design due to their increased effectiveness, to adhere to funder preferences or requirements, and to demonstrate accountability. Here are some examples from CJC grant solicitations where it is required to use best practices, standards of care, or evidence-based practices in your proposal. You may already know of best practices, standards of care, or evidence-based practices for your program, but where do you look if you don't? There are several databases available for various public safety programs. Many of these will provide real-world examples tried by other practitioners and any lessons they learned in the process. Looking to academic institutions is also an option. There are institutions across the country that specialize in specific criminal justice topics. Many have newsletters highlighting their work, which are free to subscribe to. If you are interested in an academic's work and you don't know how to access it, just ask them. Academics are happy to share their research. Another great source is to connect with one of the many researcher practitioner professional groups in existence. These groups exist to conduct applied research, test solutions, and tell others about it. Similarly, there are programs that exist to support practitioners in finding good research and translating it into applicable content. Lastly, journal articles and studies published in scientific journals are excellent sources. These can sometimes be hard to get because they are behind a paywall. Some techniques for obtaining scientific literature include reaching out to the previously mentioned sources, using the state library, and searching through Google Scholar. Not all information you find is evidence-based or a best practice. As you evaluate the various solutions or programs you come across as possible options for your program, consider the quality and rigor of the research supporting the solution. Look for programs with multiple high-quality studies such as randomized controlled trials. Determine whether you can implement the solution with fidelity, meaning that you can deliver the program as it was designed and evaluated. Consider whether the solution can be adapted to fit the specific needs of your target population and community, and evaluate the costs of implementing the solution in relation to its potential benefits. What if there isn't an evidence-based solution or best practice for your problem? What are some other ways to increase the likelihood of effectiveness? Here are some strategies. Combine multiple methodologies to create a comprehensive approach. This approach integrates data collection, on-site assessment, implementation, community engagement, and ongoing monitoring and evaluation. This multifaceted strategy addresses the complex nature of your problem, ensuring a thorough and effective response. Emphasize data collection and analysis to inform decision-making. This ensures that resources are targeted effectively and that the interventions are based on a clear understanding of the problem. Collaborate and coordinate among various stakeholders, including law enforcement agencies, community corrections, nonprofits, local community organizations, and other experts. This interagency collaboration is crucial for maximizing resources, sharing expertise, and ensuring a coordinated response to address complex challenges. Involve the community in the solution. By engaging local community members, this approach aims to build trust, foster a sense of ownership, and ensure that intervention efforts are sustainable and responsive to community needs. Follow a phased approach with clear timelines and objectives for each stage. This enables a systematic and organized implementation, ensuring the project stays on track and that progress is regularly monitored and evaluated. Place a strong emphasis on monitoring and evaluation, with a system for tracking and documenting all activities and outcomes. This focus on accountability ensures that the project is implemented effectively, that resources are used efficiently, and that the project achieves its intended goals. Lastly, document your selection. In your grant proposal, clearly describe the evidence-based solution you have chosen and the evidence that supports its effectiveness. Explain why you selected this particular solution and how it aligns with the needs of your target population and community. If you are adapting the solution, explain how you will maintain fidelity to the core components of the program. Let's look at an example using CityX and its Focus Deterrence program. Focus deterrence is considered an evidence-based practice because it has been rigorously evaluated through numerous research studies and has consistently shown positive results in reducing specific types of crime, particularly gun violence. Here's why it's considered evidence-based. It uses a targeted approach by focusing resources on a small group of high-risk offenders who are disproportionately responsible for a significant amount of crime. This strategic targeting makes interventions more efficient and impactful. It uses clear messaging. It involves a unified, clear message delivered directly to individuals by a coalition of law enforcement, community leaders, and service providers. This message emphasizes both swift and certain consequences for continued violence and genuine offers of support for those who choose to change. It has strong empirical support. A substantial body of research, including meta-analyses and evaluations of various implementations across different jurisdictions, has demonstrated its effectiveness in reducing violent crime. Studies often show statistically significant decreases in targeted offenses where focused deterrent strategies have been properly implemented. Pause the video now to describe what makes your proposed program effective. Now that we have finished building our plan, we will proceed to step 4 and discuss the program results. Earlier, we discussed evidence, data, statistics, and other credible information that are used to demonstrate the existence and severity of the problem that the program aims to address. Outcome measures, on the other hand, are used to evaluate the program's success in addressing that problem. They are the metrics that indicate whether the program's activities have resulted in the desired changes. They are the changes or results that occur as a result of the program's activities. They measure the program's effectiveness in achieving its goals. In simpler terms, imagine you're trying to lose weight. Your outcome measure would be pounds lost. It's a concrete way to see if your diet and exercise program is working. In short, the data and statistics describe the problem, while the outcome measures assess the solution. In the Project Safe Neighborhoods Focused Deterrence Program, examples of outcome measures might include overall violent crime rates in City X, reoffense rates for targeted individuals who participated in call-ins, utilization of support services by participants, or arrest and prosecution data for targeted individuals post-call-in. What other outcome measures can you think of for this program? In your proposal, you will need to describe how you will evaluate your program. This includes describing how you will measure the success of your project, identifying the data you will collect, the methods you will use to analyze it, and how you will use the results, and explaining how you will assess the impact of your project. It's crucial to identify relevant measures for your program. Relevant measures provide a way to determine if a program or intervention is achieving its goals. Without them, it's impossible to know whether the effort is making a difference. Relevant measures can help guide the implementation of a program by focusing attention on the activities and strategies most likely to lead to the desired outcomes. Funders and stakeholders want to know that their investments are having a positive impact. Relevant measures provide evidence of program effectiveness and ensure accountability. By tracking relevant measures, programs can pinpoint areas where they are succeeding and identify areas where they need improvement. This enables ongoing adjustments and improvements to the program design and implementation. When a program is shown to be effective through the use of relevant measures, it is more likely to be replicated in other settings or scaled up to serve a larger population. Let's look at some other examples. For the Organized Retail Theft Program, relevant measures might include the number of individuals charged with organized retail theft offenses, the value or quantity of stolen items recovered, a reduction in the number of organized retail theft incidents reported by retailers, an increase in successful prosecutions of organized retail theft cases, the number of identified and disrupted fencing networks, changes in retailer loss data, the number of collaborative operations conducted with retailers and law enforcement, or increased apprehension rates of organized retail theft offenders. In the Jail-Based Medications for Opioid Use Disorder program, relevant measures might include the number of individuals receiving medication for opioid use disorder while incarcerated, the number of individuals receiving medication for opioid use disorder who continue treatment post-release, the rates of recidivism for individuals receiving medication for opioid use disorder compared to those not receiving it, changes in overdose rates post-release for individuals receiving medication for opioid use disorder. The number of successful transitions to community-based treatment programs. A reduction in opioid-related incidents within the correctional facility, such as overdoses or withdrawal complications, or increased access to medication for opioid use disorder within the correctional facility as measured by the percentage of eligible individuals receiving treatment. This can feel like a difficult step in the proposal development process, and you will be glad you took the time to figure it out as part of your program design rather than when you start to answer the application questions. Pause the video and identify your program outcome measures. If your project is intended to continue beyond the grant period, describe how it will be sustained. This is step 5. Sustainability planning describes how a project will be maintained after the grant period ends. This may include future funding plans, revenue generation, or transitioning the project to other funding sources. For example, one of your activities could be sustainability planning. The methodologies might include identifying potential funding sources, building local capacity to continue program activities, and institutionalizing the multi-agency task force and its collaborative approach. Pause the video to identify whether your proposed program needs a sustainability plan. If so, draft that activity now. We have reached the final step, connecting the budget. The project budget is more than just numbers. It's a storytelling tool that shows funders exactly how your organization will use their money to bring your proposed program or intervention to life. It is important to take the time to build an accurate budget. Underestimate, and you won't have sufficient resources to implement your program. Overestimate, and you will need to return funds. A realistic and well-planned budget reassures funders that your project can be successfully carried out within the proposed scope and timeline. A transparent and detailed budget demonstrates that your organization is responsible, organized, and capable of managing funds effectively. It reflects how your project aligns with the funder's priorities by quantifying the investment required to achieve meaningful results. It also helps ensure that what you're proposing is achievable, given the available resources. A common mistake among new grant writers is treating the narrative and budget as two separate documents. In reality, they must tell the same story. Every major activity described in the proposal should be reflected in the budget, and vice versa. For each line item in your budget, ask yourself, what activity does this support? And for each major activity in your proposal, ask, where is this accounted for in the budget? The budget is a mirror of the narrative. Consistency between the two builds credibility with reviewers who are scoring your application. Let's look at an example for the Illegal Marijuana Market Enforcement Grant Program. In CJC grants, administrative costs include the personnel who directly implement the grant programs. As in this administrative costs example, you need to list each position separately. The budget includes important information, such as the position title, calculation, including FTE, the percentage of time spent on grant activities, and the annual salary. It also includes the requested amount and connects each cost to a specific program activity or objective. In this example, we see supplies, or the consumable items necessary for the jail-based medications for opioid use disorder program operations and direct patient care. The budget includes the item description, a calculation that multiplies the number of items by the unit costs, the amount requested, and a connection to the activity or objective. Here's an example of an equipment budget for a restorative justice grant program. Equipment includes tangible property with a useful life of more than 1 year and a per-item cost above a certain threshold. Check the solicitation for any cost parameters. Again, the budget includes the item description, calculation, the requested amount, and the connection to an activity or objective. You can see in this example a shared use vehicle that will be used 50% of the time for grant-related activities. The other 50% of the time, the vehicle will be used for non-grant-related activities. In the budget, the amount requested for the vehicle reflects its shared status. You should avoid charging the full cost of a shared asset to the grant unless it's used exclusively for that program. Here we have an example of potential other direct costs for an organized retail theft grant program. These are direct costs that do not fit into any other category in your budget. The budget includes the item description, calculation, a clearly stated requested amount, and the connection to a specific activity or objective. Last, we have an example of a total project budget summary for our Focused Deterrence program under the Project Safe Neighborhoods grant. Take a long pause here and put together your program budget. Congratulations, the difficult part is now behind you. You have completed your program design, you understand the funding requirements and priorities, you can clearly articulate the problem your program or intervention will address. You can clearly explain the impact of your program, you know how to measure the results, you have a well-designed timeline of activities and methodologies, and you have a budget that mirrors it all. Now you are ready to start answering the application questions. Module 3 focuses on how to do this. In this module, we will cover writing for the target audience and application scoring, question strategy, and avoiding common mistakes. Writing an effective grant proposal means aligning every part of your application with the evaluation criteria used by reviewers. The reviewers are your target audience. The reviewers may have little to no knowledge about the topic you are proposing. Answer the application questions with this in mind. Always craft your proposal with the funder's perspective in mind. Avoid using language that says, "Our agency needs this," or "We want this." Use language that demonstrates you understand the intent of the grant program and that you have carefully designed a program to help achieve this goal. Lastly, do not make reviewers search for or interpret the answer. Remember, the reviewers may be reading and scoring thousands of pages of proposals. Make it easy for them to give your application high scores. The reviewers are assessing your proposal based on some criteria which may or may not have been provided to you in the solicitation. Keeping this in mind, it is important not to assume that they know anything about your program, and they will give you points for it. You need to provide all of the critical information in your proposal. Some solicitations will include a scoring rubric. If this is the case for the grant program you are writing to, be sure to review the rubric carefully and answer the questions with this in mind. Here is an example rubric from the Restorative Justice Grant Program. Notice that each criterion is scored on a 0 to 5 scale. Strive for high scores on each criterion. The column on the left tells you what the reviewers are looking for in your application. This will include identifying any requirements that must be included in your program design. Do not assume these are obvious to your readers. Ensure that you clearly demonstrate that your program includes all the required items. Here are some strategies for writing a proposal for a grant solicitation that includes a rubric. Follow the scoring rubric. Each application question is directly tied to the rubric. Use the language of the grant. Repeat keywords like trauma-informed, community-based, pre-adjudication, and healing-centered accountability. Be explicit. Don't imply your program does something. State it clearly and show how. And provide supporting documents. Attach letters of support, MOUs, and prior data where possible. These are critical for scoring maximum points under engagement referral and eligibility. Another strategy is to examine the top scoring elements for each category and write to that score. For example, under the program description and staffing category, the highest scores will be applied for clear, measurable goals and long-term impacts, not just activities. Use of evidence-based or well-established restorative practices, like restorative justice dialogues, conferencing, or circles. Having a defined staffing plan, training plans tailored to restorative justice, and realistic time estimates per case. A tip here is to list specific trainings, such as restorative justice facilitator training or trauma-informed care. Also, activities that directly incorporate restorative principles lead to high scores. Here is an example under the engagement and referrals category. The highest scores will be applied for clear referral sources and pre-adjudication focus, detailed participant eligibility and screening process, engages both harmed and responsible parties equitably, explains onboarding and how one party opting out is handled, includes support services for both parties. A tip is to include memoranda of understanding and letters from referral partners such as the district attorney, courts, schools, and police. Also explicitly say, referrals occur at the pre-charge or pre-plea stage. If applicable, describe procedures for handling sensitive cases, such as person crimes or youth-related issues. This example is under the timeline category. Having already built your timeline in the design phase, this question is much easier to answer. The top scoring elements include specific date-based milestones and matches activities to implementation stage. Some tips here include using a simple bullet timeline or Gantt-style layout. Also, be sure to tie the activities back to your goals. Applicants are allotted points for aligning with program priorities. Here is an example of program priorities from the Restorative Justice Grant Program, where applications receive either 1 point for meeting the priority or 0 points for not meeting the priority. A tip for new programs: clearly state your intent. If you don't do it yet, state, "We plan to." Review the solicitations carefully to identify the scoring nuances of your grant program. Our final example is under the budget category. Recall what we covered about the budget in the design stage? For a top score, make sure every line item is justified and ties back to project goals. Ensure costs are reasonable, allowable, and well calculated. And make sure the budget narrative is complete for all tabs, including personnel, travel, training, etc. Some tips: justify any partial use equipment, for example, a shared use vehicle for caseworkers, and show that staff time aligns with program scope. Don't over or underestimate casework. Some solicitations will not provide a scoring rubric. You can infer key scoring categories by reading through the application questions and the detailed requirements in the solicitation. For example, the jail-based medications for opiate use disorder solicitation does not include a rubric. Still, from the questions and requirements, you might infer the following categories, each with a scale of 0, no response, to 5, exceptional response. Jurisdiction description and need, program design and implementation plan, provider partnerships and coordination, alignment with best practices, monitoring and evaluation, goals and outcomes, budget and cost, justification, completeness and compliance. Now that you know how to direct your responses for the highest points, let's look at the general strategy for answering application questions. Some questions will seem simple to answer, while others may have multiple parts and complex content. Again, you will be glad you took the time to build your program design up front. The general strategy for answering the application questions is to use a clear structure. Use headings that match the questions to make your application easy to read. And for each question, use short paragraphs or bullet points if appropriate. Follow the word limits. Stay clear and concise. We will focus more on how to do this shortly. Align every response with program goals. For example, reducing organized retail theft includes addressing violence and fencing networks, focusing on root causes, and promoting collaboration. Tell a story about how your program will reduce harm and save lives. For example, by holding call-in meetings that combine a strong message of consequences with genuine offers of support, we anticipate a reduction in reoffense rates among targeted individuals, leading to fewer violent incidents in the community. In short, you're building a logical argument. Here's the problem. Here's exactly what we'll do about it. And here's the specific, measurable positive change that will happen because of our actions, benefiting these people, this community. Back up your claims. Reference local data, existing infrastructure, or partnerships. Be specific and realistic. Set achievable goals and describe concrete steps. And lastly, be upfront. When a grant proposal question asks about something your program doesn't do, it's a common challenge. Don't answer yes that your program does something if it doesn't, or if you are not supporting the affirmation with your response. The key is to address it directly, but pivot to your strengths and explain why your approach remains effective. Let's look at some steps for answering complex questions within word limits. Step 1 is to identify what the question is really asking. Begin by breaking down the question into its fundamental components. Complex questions often include multiple prompts or sub-questions. Look at this example of a question with multiple prompts and a 250-word limit. What are the key elements this question is asking you to address? You need to include who is eligible, how they are screened, what the onboarding steps are, the types of cases, and any other criteria. You now have a checklist to make sure you cover each part. Step 2 is to identify priorities from the scoring rubric or solicitation. Prioritize what matters most. If you're tight on words, focus on requirements that are scored highest or marked as essential in the rubric. You can skip less critical background or combine lower priority points. For example, if the rubric prioritizes pre-adjudication and case types, lead with that and briefly mention onboarding last. Step 3 is to brainstorm the key points. Use brief bullet points or create a table to identify what you want to include for each element. This helps you to keep your ideas organized and focused. Now, step 4 is to draft your response. It cannot be emphasized enough the importance of being clear and concise. The structure of your answer has a vital role in this. Organize your answer into labeled parts or a logical flow to help the reviewer follow along. Use bold headers, short paragraphs, phrases in all caps, and bullet points. Let's look at this example for the Organized Retail Theft Grant Program. In 200 words or less, describe the jurisdiction your program will serve. Structure your answer into 3 topics. 1. Clearly define the geographic boundaries. 2. Include crime trends or data relevant to retail theft. 3rd, mention population size, urban, rural characteristics, and economic context. The goal is to provide an answer that helps reviewers understand the context and scope of your need. Here's another example. Again, within 250 words, how will you use grant funds to reduce organized retail theft? Use the following structure. 1. List what you'll buy or pay for. For example, dedicated staff, technology, or vehicles. 2. Tie each item directly to one of the program activities. 3. Focus on capacity building and sustainability. The goal is to show precisely how the money leads to better outcomes. In this last example, within 300 words, describe your program's specific time-based goals. It is helpful that you have already identified goals and SMART objectives in your program design stage. Now you can list these in a bullet point format. Here is another way you might clearly and succinctly structure an answer using this quick formula. Lead with the question requirement, then provide a brief explanation. Follow this up with a subpoint using a short 2 to 3 word label, then a compact description. Repeat the follow-up process for each subpoint. Let's look at an example. Here is a question from the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program. Question: does your program engage and provide culturally appropriate services to socially disadvantaged individuals? You can see that the answer follows the quick formula. It begins with the question requirement. Yes, our program provides culturally specific restorative justice circles facilitated by trained staff from the Latinx and Native communities we serve. This is followed up by 4 subpoints, each with a short title, bolded for ease of reading, then a compact description. This example uses 147 words out of the 150-word limit. It is easy to read and understand. All parts have been covered efficiently, and the reviewers do not need to search for the answer. When a grant proposal question asks about something your program doesn't do, it's a common challenge. The key is to address it directly, but pivot to your strengths and why your approach is still effective. Here's how a writer should address such a question. Acknowledge and briefly explain, without apology. Don't ignore the question. Briefly state that your program does not engage in that specific activity and concisely explain why it's not part of your approach, without making excuses. Pivot to your alternative or related strengths. Immediately follow up by explaining what your program does offer that addresses the underlying need or achieves a similar positive outcome, even if through a different method. Highlight your chosen approach. Emphasize effectiveness and alignment. Briefly explain why your chosen method is effective for your program or target population and how it still aligns with the funder's overall goals. Keep your explanation concise. You don't want to dwell on what you don't do, but rather strategically highlight what you do offer as a strong alternative. In essence, the strategy is, no, we don't do X, here's why. But we do Y, which achieves a similar or even better result for our context. And here's how. Here is an example of how to answer a question when the answer is no. While our program does not provide direct legal aid services, we recognize the critical need for comprehensive support for our participants. Instead, we have established strong partnerships with 3 pro bono legal clinics, A, B, and C, to ensure all participants have immediate access to specialized legal counsel as needed. Our case managers facilitate direct warm handoffs and track participant engagement with these external services. This collaborative model allows us to focus our resources on core intervention services, ensuring that participants receive expert legal support and maximizing our collective impact on successful reentry. While the quick formula will help keep your answers on the right track, they will need to be refined, and that is step 5. As you refine, keep this in mind. Good grant writing is economical. You say more with fewer words. Don't try to write within the word limit on your first draft. Write out everything you want to say, then go back and cut. Start broad and then refine. We have already talked about strategies such as prioritizing information into primary and secondary categories and using bullet points and lists. But how do you begin to cut from your answers? Here are some strategies to help. Using strong verbs is a powerful technique for making your grant writing more concise and impactful. Strong verbs are verbs that convey action and meaning clearly and directly without needing extra words or adverbs. They paint a vivid picture and reduce wordiness. For example, instead of, the program will be responsible for the implementation of outreach efforts, use the program will implement outreach efforts. Here, implement is a strong verb compared to responsible for the implementation of. Instead of, we are going to provide services, use we will provide services. Instead of, the team made a decision to proceed, use the team decided to proceed. In active voice, the subject of the sentence performs the action. This makes sentences more direct, clear, and often shorter. In passive voice, the subject receives the action, which can make sentences longer and less direct. Consider the following passive voice example. Outreach efforts will be implemented by the program. Here, the subject outreach efforts is receiving the action. In contrast, using active voice, the program will implement outreach efforts. The subject program is performing the action. Here's another example. Passive voice, the data was collected by the research team. Active voice, the research team collected the data. Can you see the difference? Strong verbs in active voice naturally reduce word count, which is crucial when facing strict word limits in grant applications. They make your sentences clearer and easier for reviewers to understand, preventing ambiguity. They convey confidence and directness, making your proposal more persuasive and demonstrating your organization's capability to take action. Lastly, they contribute to a more professional and authoritative tone in your writing. Removing jargon is a crucial step in condensing your grant proposal and making it more effective. Jargon refers to specialized words or phrases that are specific to a particular field, profession, or group. While it can be useful for communication among experts within that field, it often creates barriers to understanding for those outside of it. Look at these examples. Instead of, our intervention utilizes a multimodal, trauma-informed, culturally competent paradigm to address the etiology of disparate outcomes. Consider, our program uses a comprehensive approach that acknowledges the effects of trauma and cultural backgrounds to understand why different groups have unequal results. Instead of, we will leverage our synergistic capabilities to foster holistic community engagement. Consider, we will use our combined strengths to encourage broad community involvement. Removing jargon helps with reviewer understanding, clarity, and conciseness. Fluff refers to unnecessary words, phrases, or sentences that don't add new information or strengthen your argument. It's often used to make a response seem longer or more impressive, but it dilutes your message and makes it harder to read. Here are some examples. Instead of, it is critically important to acknowledge the undeniable fact that our proposed program will, without a shadow of a doubt, be a truly beneficial endeavor for the community at large. Consider using, our program will greatly benefit the community. Which version would you rather read? In simpler examples, instead of due to the fact that, consider, because, or since, in the third example, change in order to, and in the last example, instead of at this point, just use currently or now. Fluff consumes precious word count without adding substance, forcing you to cut essential details later. In essence, every word in your grant proposal should earn its place. By systematically identifying and removing jargon and fluff, you create a more powerful, understandable, and ultimately successful application. Quantifying when possible is one of the most effective ways to make your grant proposal stronger, clearer, and more concise, especially when you're up against strict word limits. It's about replacing vague language with concrete numbers and specific details. It means using numbers, percentages, frequencies, durations, and other specific measurements instead of general or subjective terms. Numbers are concise and impactful. Numbers can be very powerful in illustrating the scale of the problem or the potential impact of your solution. By consistently seeking opportunities to replace generalities with specific numbers, you will significantly strengthen your grant proposal and make it more appealing to funders. Combining sentences is an effective strategy for condensing your writing, enhancing its flow, and making it more polished. Instead of presenting ideas in short, choppy bursts, you weave them together more efficiently. By merging related ideas, you often eliminate redundant words and phrases that appear when ideas are separated into multiple sentences. This directly helps you meet word limits. Review this choppy example. The program is new. It addresses a critical need. It targets at-risk youth. This example uses 15 words. Now look at the combined example. The new program addresses a critical need by targeting at-risk youth. The combined example uses 12 words, saving you 3 words, which helps you stay within a limited word count. When sentences are combined effectively, the writing becomes smoother and easier to read. Reviewers can follow your arguments more logically as the connections between ideas are clearer. What are some ways to combine sentences effectively? Look for sentences that express related ideas, and then use various grammatical tools to link them. One way is to use conjunctions. These are simple connectors. Here is an example. Separate. Our staff is highly trained. They have extensive field experience. Versus combine. Our staff is highly trained and has extensive field experience. While this particular example does not reduce the number of words used, it does improve the clarity and ease of reading for the reviewers. Another tool is to use subordinating conjunctions. These create complex sentences showing a relationship of cause and effect, contrast, time, or condition. For example, we secured additional funding. We expanded our services. Versus, because we secured additional funding, we expanded our services. You can use relative pronouns to combine sentences. For example, compare, the program targets youth. These youth live in underserved neighborhoods. To, the program targets youth who live in underserved neighborhoods. Here is a before and after example. Compare the choppy and wordy version, which uses 40 words to convey the message, to the combined and concise version. The refined version uses only 25 words, thus saving you 15 words. By practicing these techniques, you'll find that your writing becomes much tighter, more impactful, and easier for reviewers to digest. These techniques will help you thoroughly answer the solicitation questions while staying within the word limits. Let's look at an example using a complex question with a high word limit. This example question comes from the Project Safe Neighborhoods Grant Program. Provide a brief but specific project program proposal for how PSN grant funds will be used. Describe succinctly and clearly how the proposal will implement the specific program strategy and achieve outcome measures. Describe how the proposal will promote and support meaningful anti-violence measures and reduce violent crime in Oregon. Include how success will be measured, types of data collected, and key partners involved. Be sure to describe how 30% of the awarded grant funds will support gang task forces or gang-related law enforcement activity. This is a complex question with many subcomponents and a 500-word limit. Let's look at an example response to this question that applies the strategies we have been covering. Here is an example of a good response. This is an example only and is not a real response or program from the City of Salem. Notice the clear introductory statement. It leads with the requirement. It clearly and concisely explains how the grant funds will be used. The example uses bold text and bullet points to help the reader follow along more easily. The example defines the acronyms for the first use only. The universal rule is to always write out the full name or phrase the first time you use it in a document, immediately followed by the acronym in parentheses. This allows readers unfamiliar with the acronym to understand it immediately, and then they can recognize it comfortably in subsequent uses. In the example, you can see that once the acronym has been introduced, they stick with it. Don't switch back and forth between the full name and the acronym within the same document unless there's a specific, compelling reason. Here, the response continues. You can see that the answer clearly explains who will be involved and how funding will be used. Again, the use of headers, bold letters, and bullet points makes this easy to follow. The sentences are free from jargon and fluff. They use sentence connectors to create concise messaging. This example effectively answers a complex question with multiple subcomponents. It uses 450 words out of the 500-word limit. On to the next step in our question strategy, proofreading. After writing, take a break before proofreading. Step away from your writing for a few hours, or overnight if possible. You'll catch more mistakes with fresh eyes. Proofread for structure and content first. Ask yourself, did I answer every part of the question? Do the ideas flow logically from one sentence to the next? Did I repeat the grant's priorities or goals in my wording? Does this make sense to someone who doesn't know our program? After structure and content, tighten up language. Look for unnecessary filler words and long-winded phrases that can be simplified. Try to keep sentences under 25 words where possible. Be clear, not fancy. Next, proofread for grammar, spelling, and style. Use a spell checker and read it aloud. Typos hide in plain sight, especially after you have been writing and rewriting. Watch for subject-verb agreement, misused words, consistent tense and tone. Avoid shifting from past to present. Copy and paste errors. While copy and paste is a helpful tool, a common mistake is leaving old content in place or not updating dates when copying content from a previous version or a different use document into the grant proposal. Be consistent with names and acronyms. Write out acronyms the first time you use them. For example, Oregon State Police, OSP. In any following uses, use OSP. Lastly, be consistent with fonts and formatting. The final step is having someone else review your writing. Ask a colleague, partner, or someone unfamiliar with the project to read it. Provide them with this checklist. Does it answer every question? Is anything confusing or vague? Are there any grammar or clarity issues? Encourage them to mark unclear spots with comments or highlighters and not to rewrite it for you. We have already identified some mistakes grant writers make. But before we move on to Module 4, let's take a moment to cover some of the most common ones. The first is not following instructions. This includes failing to adhere to the funder's guidelines, such as formatting, word limits, and required documents. Next is failing to align the project with the funder's mission and priorities. We have covered the importance of this extensively in Module 1. A significant one is focusing on the organization's needs rather than the project's impact. For example, emphasizing how the grant will benefit the organization rather than the target population. Getting a proposal written and submitted on time can lead to careless editing. Be careful not to submit proposals with typos, grammatical errors, and inconsistencies. Watch out for jargon or vague language. Not writing in a clear, concise, and easily understandable manner impacts the ability of reviewers to read and score your proposal. Don't forget to clearly state the amount of funding you are requesting. Ensure that you submit a budget that is realistic, comprehensive, and well justified. Lastly, pay attention to deadlines and give yourself more time than you think you need. Module 4, Proposal Submission. In addition to all of the reasons we have already covered, it is important to submit a professional and quality grant proposal because when you submit a proposal, it becomes public record. In this brief and final module, we will cover a final review checklist, formatting and packaging the proposal, submitting the proposal, and what to know if your proposal gets approved. You have no doubt spent much time proofreading and editing by now. However, it is a good idea to conduct a final review before submitting your proposal. Do one last check to ensure all word limits have been followed, all of the required questions answered, the spelling and grammar look good, the budget aligns with the narrative, letters of support, MOUs, and attachments are included, and materials have been saved in the correct format for submission to the portal. When formatting and packaging the proposal, ensure that you prepare any required attachments. Ensure that all uploads are clearly labeled and formatted as requested, typically in PDF or Excel format. You are now ready to submit the proposal. All CJC applications are submitted through the online portal. What's next? Read the Criminal Justice Commission Grant Administration Guide so you know what to expect if your proposal gets approved. This will include information about the Grant Award Agreement, which provides guidelines and restrictions on expending funds. The Grant Administration Guide will also explain the reporting requirements and what to expect regarding program monitoring, including desk monitoring, on-site visits, and in-person engagement. Lastly, the Grant Management Handbook will provide you with all the information you need to know about closeout and compliance. This concludes the training on writing effective grant proposals for the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. This training is intended to equip you with the knowledge and skills to write a compelling grant proposal that effectively communicates the value of your project and to increase your funding success.